Hello everyone. Welcome back to my book Strategic Management Accounting, a critical exploration with a sustainability angle. We are now in Chapter 2, Unit 2. Porterian Discourses of Strategy, or Michael Porter's contribution to strategy discourses. Michael Porter made significant contribution, making him one of the most celebrated, popular strategy guru that we know. Originally coming from an industrial economics background, his contributions started with a critique on classical or neoclassical economic framework of structure, conduct, performance. So usually in industrial economics, in the economic policy planning circles, there used to be a popular framework in which it is understood that, it is argued that the conduct of a firm, that is, strategies of a firm, is determined by the structure, economic structure in which that particular firm operates. And then in turn, such decisions will determine the corporate performance and the industry performance. So that's what we call structure, conduct, performance model. The structure will determine the decisions that a firm, either individually or collectively, can make, and ultimately the performance of those individual firms and the collective or the industrial performance. So that is structure, performance, conduct framework. Now in this classical economic or neoclassical economic framework, the firm is just depending upon the specific structure in which it operates. So therefore the firm does not have any strategic agency. For example, if the firm is in a perfectly competitive market, the firm will be a price taker. So when the competitiveness improves in the industry, when the industry become or the market become highly competitive, then according to the neoclassical economic understanding, firm will not have any strategic agency. So that is the point based upon, or that is the point that the Michael Porter directed his critique. So Michael Porter revised this framework, arguing that the firms do have a strategic agency based upon their past performance, their creativity, their innovations, their profitability, the previous or past performance, return on investment, and so on. They can influence the structure. They can recreate the structure. And they can have possibilities of achieving abnormal gains and what you call competitive advantages. So that is the Michael Porter's contributions starting point, revising the traditional structure, conduct, performance model so that the firm can be attributed with a strategic agency. So in doing so, Michael Porter first articulated that strategies matter. Strategies are necessary. It is not simply the structure that determines everything, but strategies determine structural possibilities as well as corporate performance. And then the second most or the most important contribution or a central contribution that Michael Porter made is the concept of competitive advantage. So he introduced a new economic conception or a category called competitive advantage in comparison to the traditional economic conceptions of absolute advantage and the comparative advantage. A competitive advantage is the capacity of a firm or a nation to outperform its competitors for a sustainable period of time. If I repeat it, a competitive advantage as a concept means the capacity of a firm or a nation to outperform its competitors for a sustainable period of time. So that means the Porter was talking about competitive advantage at two distinct but interrelated levels, national level and the firm's level. So he got two books, competitive advantage of a nation as well as the other one, competitive advantage of a firm. Now, when it comes to the competitive advantage of a nation, the higher level, he articulated a model which we now famously call the diamond model, in which he articulates that there are 6 interrelated factors that ultimately determine the competitive advantage of a nation. So these are the 6 key factors. So that's at the national level. So that's the starting point. And then he goes down to the firm level. So when it comes to the firm level, as well as the national level, the competitive advantage is ultimately determined by the most critical factor that determines the competitive advantage, especially at the firm level, is the specific strategies that a firm would adopt. So that is how he signifies the notion of strategy. Strategy is very fundamental. Strategy is the most fundamental element upon which a firm can ultimately achieve a competitive advantage. That is, its capacity to outperform its competitors for a sustainable period of time. So strategy matters. And then, what he meant by strategy is how a firm can become distinct, different from its competitors. So he very specifically argued that strategy is more than efficiency. Strategy is not simply doing better. Strategy is not something or simply doing better what everybody does. Strategy is something, or strategy means you do something different. So differentiation is the core concept of strategy for Michael Porter. So how a firm can become different. So that is the basis of strategy and the competitive advantage. Then, when or how a firm can become different. The Michael Porter proposed generic strategies. In order to become different, or the manners in which the firm can be different, depends upon the generic strategies that the firm would adopt. So to repeat it, a competitive advantage depends on the strategy. Strategy means differentiation. And differentiation depends upon the generic strategies that you would adopt. So generic strategies are basically the different ways of making the firm different from the competitors. And there are 2 ways a firm can do that according to Porter. First one is value-based differentiation. For example, a firm can offer a superior product, high quality product, a superior service to the market. So the firm gets differentiated its offering to the market on the basis of the value that it offers, quality that it offers, services that it offers. So that what we broadly call value-based differentiation. And if someone follows that particular strategy, Porter calls that differentiation strategy. So a specific name differentiation strategy is attributed to differentiation on the basis of value. And then the second mode of differentiation is cost-based differentiation. So in which case a firm would offer a good, acceptable product at a low price, low cost. So your differentiation is the cost-based. So in which case Porter calls it cost leadership strategy. So there are two, broadly speaking, generic strategies: differentiation strategy or cost leadership strategy. Then, on the basis of the scope, according to which these two generic strategies can be applied, there are two other possibilities. So you can apply either of these generic strategies in a broader scope or a narrower scope. Niche market scope or a broader mass marketing scope. So in that sense, we have four possible generic strategies: differentiation strategy, cost leadership strategy in a broad scope, or differentiation strategy and the cost leadership strategy in a narrow focused. So those are the four generic strategies. The second framework of, or key framework of Porter, generic strategies. Then, when a firm is going to decide which generic strategy that firm should adopt, a firm should carry out a specific set of strategic analysis. So they can be about analyzing the industry, and that can be about analyzing the internal value creation process of the firm, and it can be about analyzing the response profile of your competitors. So basically, in order to determine which strategies that a firm should adopt, the Porter suggests that a firm should carry out three interrelated analysis: industry analysis, internal value chain analysis, and the competitor analysis. So the industry analysis, to do the industry analysis, Porter suggests so-called 5 forces model. So that will assess the rivalry or the competitiveness of the industry, the factors that determine the competitiveness of the industry. So basically that involves at the center the rivalry among the existing firm, the intensity of the competition. And then there are 4 other factors connecting to that rivalry: is the bargaining power of the buyers, bargaining power of the suppliers, threat of substitutes, and the threat of new entry. So when you combine these 5 forces, you can analyze the industry. So that's the industry analysis framework proposed by Porter. Then, when it comes to the internal assessment, the organizational internal value chain assessment, he proposed a value chain analysis. So that basically tried to assess a chain of activities through which the value is created and distributed, including infrastructural activities. So that's the value chain analysis framework by Porter. And then third framework of analysis proposed by Porter is analyzing your immediate competitors. How do they respond to your strategic moves? How do they respond to your market actions? So this is an action-reaction kind of a framework. So this is, he called it four-corner analysis. So those are the four key factors to be analyzed according to Porter's four-corner analysis. Now, Porter has a grand schema of strategy. That is his grand contribution. Highly rational, highly logical, model of understanding the notion of competitive advantage, strategy, and various forms of strategic analysis from the national level to the firm level. So this diagram summarizes this grand schema of Porter's strategy. Or at the top level, you find the national level competitiveness, the competitiveness of a nation. Then it comes down to the firm level through generic strategies and three frameworks of strategic assessment. So that's the summary of Porter's grand schema of strategy. Then, very recently, around 2006 or 7, or in that particular period, beginning from that particular period, Porter and his colleagues started to incorporate the notion of sustainability into his frameworks. They were concerned about the significance of sustainability within the discourses of strategy. So accordingly, they published few articles which tries to capture the notion of strategy into their assessment framework. So in the chapter, I have summarized in a specific table how Porter's and his colleagues' subsequent writings try to incorporate the notion of sustainability into value chain analysis and the industry analysis. So that's the unit 2 or the final unit of chapter 2. Michael Porter's contribution to strategy discourses. So that is a brief introduction. You can have further understanding, deep understanding by reading the chapter. So in my next video, I will move into the chapter 3, which talks about strategic pricing. So until that, thank you very much for watching this video. See you again.